Welcome to Breaking Barriers with R&D, your direct line to Randy Dowdy and David Hula, here to help fellow farmers unlock the potential in their fields. Are you looking to implement best practices that maximize ROI? You've come to the right place. Real value, real yield, real ROI. Breaking Barriers with R&D starts now. Breaking Barriers is brought to you by BASF and Veltima Fungicide. With the performance of Veltima Fungicide from BASF, you can take your best results even further. And by Calmer Cornheads, home of the world's only all-weather stock roll. Learn more at calmercornheads.com. And by Durastack Trait Technology, the latest innovation from Syngenta. Available for the 2027 season, Durastack technology features 3 powerful modes of action to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch corn rootworms every move.
Well, welcome to Breaking Barriers with R&D. Today you just got the D part right now, but we are fortunate to have Mr. Marion Calmer on it. He's a sponsor. Their company has been sponsoring the podcast. And one thing that I have learned, when I can surround myself with Mr. Marion, I am going to learn something. We're going to have fun. And then he's going to share some of his knowledge with all of those. And Marion, I've been with you around at the No-Till, National No-Till Conference, National Strip Till, Commodity Classic. You've come out to the farm. You know, we just had a bunch of good times, I would like to think. So welcome.
Well, thank you. And congratulations on all your success.
Well, the success has not just been me. Of course, we know the good Lord had to bless us. But,
Yes.
you know, it's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. You know, this podcast, you know, Dowdy's just now getting home from somewhere. He's going to be home with his boy, and he'll come in a little bit later. I find myself in what I think has probably been one of the garden spots of this country. I'm in Nebraska, and when I left the hotel Monday morning, I saw very few pivots running. Today, headed back to Omaha to get on the airport, I see maybe 10% of them running. And they're not running because they really need a bunch of water. They're running to maybe do some fertilizer. But I look at that crop, Marion, and it's got green stalks. They're not maturing yet, but they're at R3, R4, and they got to manage some residue. And that's what I want to cover with you today is what you've been doing to help industry and residue management. And I just want to say industry. You've helped Rimwood Farms tremendous on how we can manage our residue. So I don't want to steal any of your thunder. I want to hear what y'all been doing and where we are today.
Yeah, they always say that necessity is the mother of invention. And of course, a longtime no-tiller, we were just having too much residue. And we're planting 15-inch corn into 15-inch beans, and we just could barely get it in the ground. So that drove me to invent something that would help accelerate decomposition. And so we spent a lot of hours testing and developing. And so we came out with the BT chopper, and it cuts and shears. But for years, a corn stalk like this, even if you crimp it, it's just not going to decompose. And that outer rind or the bark of this corn stalk right here is pretty tough. And I want to feed the earthworms, microbes in the soil, but I also want this as plant food. And so by chopping it up, and we're also shearing it into 2 halves, that exposes this pith right here. And that's what the earthworms, it's soft, they can eat it, microbes can decompose it. And by spring, it's pretty much melted down and gone. And soil's gonna be a lot drier, a lot warmer.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we're talking about that right now, but all of a sudden, Zach in the podcast, Woody Does Magic, he zoomed in on you. And I didn't really pay attention because I got my glasses up because they're a little bit fogged up right now. I see you in I don't know if it's your shed garage, but you got some old vehicles or I got to be smart in what I say. You got some older vehicles, and then it looks like a tractor. You always got to try to outdo everything that we do, don't you, Marion?
Well, I just happened to be out here at our home, working in my office, and we've had family out here. Of course, we got married this summer, and class reunion. And so I brought out the old cars. We got an 8N Ford, a W9 Farmall in here, and the 64 Chevy Super Sports. And I thought they'd make a nice backdrop, something different to look at.
Yeah, we don't just, sometimes we're looking at posters or whatever, but we're not in a cornfield. So I guess Marion, I've been around you. I didn't know that was one of your passions for some of those older automobiles.
Yeah, the old cars that I had in high school, and then the little 8N Ford was the first tractor that Dad taught me how to drive when I was a kid. And that's been, like 65 years ago. So that's a while back.
I would say. Now, had that tractor been there the whole time, or did it leave and then you went and found it and got it back?
Well, we had it there the whole time. I mean, it sat behind the shed, and the tires, rotted, and the rims rusted, and the motor hadn't seized. But it looked pretty sad when we drug it out of the weeds. We had to cut a tree off to get it out, and it's been about a 10-year process of restoring it. We just finished it a couple of years ago.
Sure. Well, I know, my dad's, his kind of his farm museum, my late dad's and mom's, where it's just got a bunch of tractors. Nothing there originated on the farm. We tried finding a couple years ago, and by the time it was just too much work and not worth the view wasn't worth the climb. So he just started continue getting reconditioned stuff. But it's neat, that passion, because I know what my dad had. I don't have that same passion. I know the next generation does not have that same passion. So at some point, we got to instill it in somebody so they can see where we used to be. And
Yeah.
so, all right, not to get back to what we originally talked about, but the your BT choppers. I think I was at one of the hefty field days, or one of the venues, and you and I happened to be there after we had talked prior, and I was going to get some of your super choppers. I think it was the first year you had those, and I'm showing pictures of your corn that's 14 foot tall, just green as the gore when we're picking it. And I remembered you saying, um, Dave, we've never tested those in that environment. We're running all of that residue through, but it has been one of the best things that we have done. Not residue management isn't as big a deal for us because we got heat, we got moisture. We harvesting it green, the biology seems to be kicking in. But our dilemma was we're picking this corn in the fall, and it might be a 200-300 bushel crop or better. Then we got to no-till wheat into that. And once we went with those chopping heads, with the chopping rolls, it made our wheat crop. That's where we first saw the big advantage, because, as you say, you turn it into confetti. So,
Yeah. Well, I remember that conversation. It was here in Northern Illinois, and you said that your corn had two nice big ears, and you thought it was going to start with a 6 that year, and sure enough, it did. And I came up to you after the meeting, and you were all excited, and I said, I don't think we've ever picked 600 bushel corn before, so it'll be a new challenge. But we got along just fine, and I remember you calling back and said, even with cover crops or coming with wheat right behind it, you'd never been able to go right in behind the combine, but with these you can't. So yeah, it took us a long time to develop them, but boy, they really work in basically all conditions, kind of an all-weather stock roll. So whether it's green stalks, dry stalks, damp is probably one of the tougher conditions. That early fog in the morning, but you're still wanting to pick corn. They do a nice job.
yeah, well, things that we've done over time. I've listened to you at the national conferences. You talk a lot about how to set combines, and then you talk about your components. And you know what is unique? Well, one of the things that I saw that was unique was how the heads and the stalk rolls are just bringing the corn further in. Explain some of the things when a guy looks at your stalk rolls. what's looking different and why have you done what you did with. Now, don't share any patent secrets or anything like that, but explain to them what they would expect to see, because it's some of those things just surprise me.
Sure. Yeah. The first obstacle that we have is being able to get the corn stalk past the spirals and into the entry zone or the feeding chamber of these stalk rolls. And what we noticed was that with the older John Deere stalk rolls, use 6 flutes overlapping with 6 more flutes, and at 1,000 RPMs a minute, that's just a solid wall of steel. And so the corn stalk would come up against that, and it almost would act like a bulldozer. And even though you'd be running the corn head fast, it just never allowed the stalk to get into the fluted area. And so what we patented was the absence of flutes. And so now the stalk rolls rotate, and then we have a blank area that opens up, and that allowed the stalk to come in. That was the real breakthrough, the real secret that we patented and that we utilize to this day. And then we just follow that with 10 sharp blades on a regular BT chopper, or like the ones that you've been running for the last 4 or 5 years are the super chopper that has 12 blades. And we've learned the finer that we can chop the corn stalk in the fall, the bigger the yield that we're going to have the following year, especially in corn on corn.
Yeah, because being out here in Nebraska, they don't get the heat that I have, and moisture. We're usually 44, 45 inches of rainfall. It never always happens when we want it, but having the lack of heat, and you mentioned the earthworms, and they're wanting that pith and just the stalk degradation. Uh, I share with growers, if you can pick your crop while there's moisture in the stalk, that's going to be the beginning of your residue management. And like you just said, if you cut it up into the smaller pieces of the confetti, now out in Nebraska, they have a thing called wind that they deal with. And when I was with some growers, they just had some wind out here in Omaha. I was with Mickey Gottschall Sunday, and they had some tremendous 90+ mile-an-hour winds just outside Omaha. Trees, corn was down, a couple pivots turned upside down, and we never wish anything like that. But I hear a lot of times about growers talking about keeping some of the residue on their ground and cutting it into smaller pieces. I can only see how that would help it anchor to the ground and not blow. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, that's correct. That was one of our early concerns. And we tested, like chopping corn heads versus our BT chopper stalk rolls. And with a chopping corn head, it basically cuts the stalk off right at the root ball. And I'm not in favor of that, because that short stubble that's left out there is kind of like a snow fence. And so that's going to help hold the leaves and also the husk in place. But you're exactly right. For this confetti that we have right here that comes out below the corn head, it almost sticks to the soil, and it's so small that it really doesn't have a surface area where the wind can get a hold of the confetti. So with other traditional stalk rolls, everything is loose and fluffy on the ground, and boy, on a windy day, it will blow across the field. So I encourage growers, leave 10 or 12 inches of stubble, use it as a snow fence, keep that residue in your field, not in your ditches.
Well, I think it's important because I use the residue as a way in which I can disseminate or move some fertilizer around, because typically we're running a lot of fertilizer with the planter, and we're doing strip tilling. And for example, the potash, as we know, when the corn crop is growing, it's a large consumer of potash. It'll take as much potash and oftentimes more than what it actually requires of nitrogen. And then when you go through the field harvesting, the potash pretty much stays with the stalk. It's not like it's leaving with the grain like it does in soybeans. So we have it banded, and then all of a sudden we harvest it, and now we've just broadcasted that fertilizer back with their residue sitting there, and then as it decays, and when you break it up into smaller pieces, we're getting that release a little bit faster, and we've just spread it out. Um, I look as our residue management starts when we do the harvesting, and that's so important. And if we let that residue blow off, I know there's some areas where people like to bale corn stalks and sell them for whatever. I don't want to reinvest in fertilizer. So I think what you got going on to me keeps that residue there and spreads it out. So it's just like me broadcasting fertilizer after that, Mr. Marion.
Yep, I would agree with you 100%. We're trying to accelerate that decomposition so that we can turn this is plant food, and you're exactly right. We want to get it back into the soil as quickly as we can. And you also mentioned a little bit about nitrogen, and there's a lot of people that are, corn on corn. And University of Illinois has done quite a bit of research over the last 4 or 5 years and written a couple of papers. And they're currently favoring the BT chopping stalk rolls at 9.8 bushel advantage. And they said some of that's because it's such a fast decomposition that the nitrogen doesn't tie up with it. And I've seen photos side by side of their research plots, and where the residue is large, there's a lot of firing starting to go on, this time of the year, and you can just tell it doesn't look as good a crop. But then over here where we've chopped it up, and of course they incorporate it down there at University of Illinois, the corn's greener and taller, and like I said, about a 9.8 bushel advantage. And I'm kind of the business plan kind of guy. And so we calculate the BT choppers going to cost you about $2 an acre to use them. And if you get, 10 bushel of corn, maybe $40. So you spend $2 for chopping stalk rolls, $40 worth of grain in continuous corn.
Yeah, well, that $40, that's the way it is now. Just think what it was like 2, 3 years ago. We were making a lot more. It didn't take as many bushels to pay for it. And, you know, I think about, we installed the choppers ourselves. All right, talk about the installation. It's not complicated. I was amazed at how simple. One of your fellas came out. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name now, but one of them came out, showed how easy it was. We popped them out. But then we also did another thing. Your deck plates. You got some deck plates too. I don't hear you talk much about it, but I know that there's an advantage to your deck plates.
Yeah, that was one of the early things that I learned when I was working with the John Deere folks. We were testing the beveled stripper plate versus the straight stripper plate, and the engineering department, both at Case and Deere, talked about it. And the bevel allows the leaves to go on through easier, and then also the husk and the butt of that ear. And you can get the ear shank down there. So not only are we going to separate the ear, but we're hoping to husk it as well, because the ear shank is this small part of corn stalk here that goes from the node to the cob. And so that's one of the advantages of the stripper plate. The other one is that we've got a wider V at the opening. And I learned that by harvesting down corn. And it's not that blunt edge that you would see on a commercial or a standard stripper plate from Deere or Case. So that helps it feed a little bit better. And really, like I said, really notice that in down corn. And then the third advantage is when the butt of the ear comes down, those beveled stripper plates more emulate the curvature of the bottom of that ear. So now we're displacing that energy around the ear, and it's kind of like pushing the kernels back toward the cob instead of trying to strip them off. And so we get a little butt shelling there as well. So the stripper plates, they're a big portion of the kit as well. And we have a lot of people that really have enjoyed using them.
Well, we put them on the first year, and I wouldn't go back. Now I do have some landowners that wish I did have them because they like to do some duck some waterfowl hunting and or some dove hunting, and we've taken some of their food away, and
Yeah,
but yeah, they sure want me to continue to farm, so we gotta capture every grain we possibly can. Uh, so that's talking about your Commerce, BT, and your super choppers. The last time you and I were on a panel together, and I believe it was at the Commodity Classic, you
yep,
were up a 3-year study of some stratification of fertilizer. And I don't know if you knew we were going to kind of play maybe go there or not, but I
sure.
just to get some ideas what you saw from it, if you could share the audience, because you've been a continuous no-till guy. We were what we would consider never till. My late dad started in the fall of '86, and we've been no-tilling ground ever since. Now we've kind of transitioned. Some of our acres are in the strip till using the soil warrior. We've liked that portion in fertilizer to move fertilizer deeper in the profile, get a little bit different or better root architecture system. But your stratification concept, it intrigued me. We did some of the stuff at the home to see. So, kind of give us a 3-year recap what you saw.
Certainly. So started no-tilling in the mid 80s and just went to spreading the dry phosphorus potassium on top of the ground. And my soil test showed that, everything was fine. But in the summer, I started noticing the nutrient deficiencies in the plant. And of course, I've been speaking at the no-till conference for over 30 years now. And people had talked about stratification and nobody had ever really nailed it down. So the stratification is, in my book, is where we have a surface layer of excessive amounts of phosphorus and potassium. And then down in the root zone where we're pulling the fuel or the phosphorus potassium to feed the corn plant, basically got depleted over that 40 years. And so the way I found that out was that I went in with my soil probe. I'm sure you've all seen the picture of me holding it, and we cut it into cubes that are 1 inch in length. And so we take that 8-inch profile and then we send it off in a bag 1 inch at a time. And sure enough, we're looking at a potassium level of 500 or 600 pounds per acre for us in that top inch or two. And then down where the roots are at, we're down in there to like 160, 170, which is very depleted. So that was an awakening for me. And so now we have two issues. We've identified we have stratification. Now, what happens when we de-stratify the soil? And one way, of course, to do it is mechanically. And so we went in, mixed those nutrients in. The first year we had a 9 bushel advantage in soybeans. And then, of course, the next year we followed with corn, and we had a 20 bushel advantage to where we had de-stratified. Still had the same nutrient levels on both sides, but mixing it into the soil profile definitely grows better corn and better soybeans. And it's pretty common sense to me. What do you think?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm curious. You said you had to cut a tree down to get that tractor out. Did you have to cut a tree or two down to get the mower plow out, or how to mix it up? So
yeah, people tease me about that, but yeah, it was back in the timber, and the soft coat that was on there, it kind of started to leave, and we had to do quite a bit to get the moldboards to scour up. But don't get me wrong, I own about 1,500 acres. We only did 2 acres. Just to kind of prove the importance of putting phosphorus and potassium in the root zone, not above of the root zone. Especially, it was a drier year, is when you really start to see the effects of stratification. Now, our corn and soybean crop this year, we've had just almost a perfect growing season, and you don't see many nutrient deficiencies this year at all.
So it sounds to me like you're part of the reason we got low prices. You're doing everything you can to have a price. I'm doing what I can to try to keep the price up, just to have a decent yield. But I've been in some corn yesterday and today. I think growers, and we'll learn this during the crop tour next week, farmers need to get out in the field. I don't know that it's each problem as they feel, because there was some tip back today, some, not the population or stand that they thought they had dropped. But yet it is a good crop. When you drive through Nebraska and you can't recognize the corners of the pivots to realize that they're dryland corners.
Right.
Amount of grass that they have cut along the ditches. You see all the big round bales, but the stratification, I mean, that is real, you know. And I think about the late Francis Childs. He had that mini moldboard plow. He just turned stuff 90 degrees, and he just had a good root system. He had oxygen getting down in there. Probably helped his carbon penalty with the way the residue was breaking down. So, but you think about, all right, you're still probably doing a lot of no-till. I'm doing a lot of no-till. You get guys doing some vertical tillage, and they're only moving it. They might take it from the top inch, and they might be pushing it down into the third and fourth inch, but they're not getting it all the way down that they want. So how do you feel like you can continue to get nutrients down deeper without bringing in a mower plow?
Yeah, you brought back about Francis Childs, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Herman Warsaw when I was in my 20s, and then Francis Childs, and now you, and always been inspired by what you folks do. But I think it goes to show all of us, if you're looking for good yields and a healthy looking corn crop, the nutrients need to be down there where the roots are at. And so we got a soil warrior, and we can strip till, and we get those nutrients down there where we need them. And they've been doing research at the University of Illinois, and some of the genetics. I mean, genotypically, we're talking about the profile of that root zone varies from hybrid to hybrid, and so that is also a player on whereabouts do we want to put that phosphorus and potassium. So I think the lower in the profile I can get it, the better. And we mentioned about my soil tests, that 0 to 8 inch, and it's just excessive at the top 2 inches and depleted in the next 6. But we actually went deeper, and so we went from 8 on down to 16. And if you think it's depleted from 2 down to 8, it's really depleted from there on down. So I think that was some of the things that Herman and Francis were working on. The hog manure, the livestock manure, is trying to get the nutrients deeper into the profile.
Well, I oftentimes share an analogy with many growers. I remember my late granddad talking about, he remembered walking behind a mule or an ox or a horse or whatever. And, they were growing a crop to feed their livestock. So they were very much into that livestock feed. They had all the manure, they spread that out, they tilled in. We do a little bit different with how we're feeding livestock. I like to think we're feeding livestock below ground. And when you got all that stratification, you're not doing livestock below ground a justification, because you got livestock, the biology on the top inch, you got biology 2, 3, 4, all the way down. And I was in a soybean root pit a month or so ago, and I had never been in one, and I saw nodulization 3 foot down below the surface. I just didn't know what happened. And, it was a sandier soil, it was porous. So they had that, and it caused me to go do it at home, and we are seeing some of the same. So moving nutrients, we can do it mechanically. I hear Randy talk about using cover crops, and, as the roots decay, there's some nutrients there. You mentioned the earthworms. I think about night crawlers and earthworms. As they're pulling residue down, they're moving some of those nutrients, and those environments that don't try to strive to have or don't focus on that, they're missing on some cheap tillage.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to bring out, we're not going to bring out our mobile plow. We
No.
have compaction. We'll do some stuff there to fix it. It's usually on the headlands where there's controlled traffic with grain carts or trucks. But outside of that, we're using biology, cover crops, and then, a soil warrior to get some of those nutrients down deeper. So I like all that you're saying because, you know, good people. I like to say we surround ourselves with good folks, and I feel like some of what you've been learning is rubbed off on me, Mr. Marion.
Well, it goes both ways. I see Randy's joined us here, and we picked up a few things from him as well.
Yes, we have. Good golly. So welcome to Breaking Barriers with R&D, man.
Glad to be here. We've been on an airplane since about 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning, and finally made it back to Georgia. And I got a nice balmy 100-degree temperature in my truck when I landed. So very humid. And by the time I got to the farm, it was just absolutely pouring it out like a bucket. So it was raining hard. Um, most of the corn is well on its way to being harvested here, and almost everybody is standing in lines or either shut down due to weather, one of the two. They harvest for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, and the lines are long. The basis is dirt cheap. Nobody wants it. There's corn wall to wall. There's no storage down here. There was a provision with insurance this year on dry land acres. They were banking on an insurance payout, and it rained. Now there's corn everywhere, Marion. We are not noted for corn from bumper to on a lot of acres, and now we've got a bunch of corn, and there's nowhere to go with it. And the end users are taking advantage of it. So I heard a little bit about the stratification, Mr. Marion. I know David welcomed you, but I want to do it as well. We've been knowing each other for quite some time, and
For
it's
sure.
always good to have you part of the show. And I heard a little bit about on your stratification, and I'm still, we have an advantage here in the South. We got something growing 300 days a year. We probably got something growing 365, but intended crops 300 for sure. And that planting and harvesting process probably is why we don't have something growing, but it's a challenge everywhere we go. If people want an aha moment, just tell them to go pull a 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18-inch sample, and they'll know exactly what you're seeing. I had one guy buy a farm that I know of, and he was pretty proud to own it. And I told him to go pull a sample of 0 to 6, 6 to 12. And after he did it, he saw the results, Mr. Marion. He says, I paid $14,000 an acre for this ground, and if I'd have known what I know with these soil samples, I wouldn't have bought the ground. And
Yep.
I said, well, don't feel too bad. I said, go pull some of the ground you got that you've owned forever, that you feel like you've been doing a good job on it, and now compare it. And he come back to me. He says, there's good news and bad news. He said, the good news is the ground I bought is probably a good investment because it's no worse than the other, but now I don't know how to fix it because the ground he had the same problem. So, as David, go ahead. As David mentioned, though, there's definitely a problem, and Mr. Childs was onto something years ago for sure. Constantly turning that ground.
Yeah, you make some really good points. I guess I'm going to go as far as to tell you that I believe stratification is a naturally occurring event. It's been going on since the beginning of time. And so, when man first came and started to use the moldboard plow and turn it over, he got a pretty good boost out of that because there was a lot of surface fertilizer that had been built up over time. But I think, you two guys, when you were on stage with me there at the Commodity Classic, I think we were all toying with the idea when it comes to the old days and the use of the moldboard plow, how much of the yield advantage came from the tillage, how much of it came from destratifying the soil. And so that's still kind of a mystery, but I'm with you. I mean, we put the moldboard plow back in the timber and we're using cover crops to help us, and they're helping. But how much of this destratification is necessary? So that's one issue. The second one that I've got is I got myself into this jam over 40 years of no-tilling by surface applying, and it's not no-till's fault. It's my management of surface applying the P and K. And so I'm really the one to blame. But now, how do I avoid it in the future? I don't want to go back to where I was. And so that's the great thing about strip till, or putting it down with the planter and put the fertilizer where the roots are. Don't make the roots try to grow up to get to the fertilizer. It doesn't make any sense.
Yep, I would agree. Well, Dowdy, I'm going to have to pass the baton. You just got home. I got about 35 minutes to get to the airport to check this car in and jump on a plane. Mr. Marion, it is always a pleasure, and we truly appreciate your support on the podcast Breaking Barriers with R&D. And I look forward to hearing and learning more stuff from any enterprise you start doing. And congratulations, new bride.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that on to her. Good to see you as always. Drive safe and have a good harvest. Okay.
All right.
Be safe, David.
Yep.
Calmar Cornheads produces the world's only all-weather stalk rolls. The BT chopper's deep intermeshing, razor-sharp blades not only cut and chop corn stalks into confetti-like pieces, but also shear stalks into two halves, exposing the pith. This results in accelerated residue decomposition, easier planting, and higher yields. Call Calmar Cornheads today to upgrade your cornhead with the BT Chopper Stalk Roll at 309-629-9000 or visit us online at calmarcornheads.com.
With corn rootworm costing farmers up to $1 billion a year, you need the right strategy. Introducing Durastack trait technology, featuring 3 powerful modes of action to strike corn rootworm at full force, outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch their every move with the industry's first triple BT protein stack built for corn rootworm control. Take back your yield potential. Make your move at Durastack.com. Available for the 2027 season.
Veltima fungicide outyields the competition by an average of 7 bushels per acre. But you've never been average. The only competition that really matters is you versus you. And with the performance of Veltima fungicide from BASF, you can take your best results even further. Beat your own record. Get every bushel you deserve. And make this your best season yet with Veltima fungicide from BASF. Always read and follow label directions.
Well, Mr. Marion, what's new in the world of Calmar Cornheads? What do we got to look forward to? What's in it? Everywhere I go, people talk about, Randy, what head do you run? What can I do to get some of this organic matter so I don't have to struggle with it next year? What do I need to do? I struggle every year with corn on corn, or even planting in the residue, planting beans in the corn stubble. What can I do? And the first thing I always tell them is harvest a corn stalk that's green. So high moisture corn, get it out early. It breaks down faster. We need to maximize that. But then after that, I talk about minimizing that stalk residue and cutting it into small pieces as possible. And we shifted over years ago to using your heads and your choppers and all those things. And man, I know a lot of growers that have converted, put the BT choppers and different things on their, from your portfolio on their heads, and even purchase your heads. And, it's made a difference. But walk us through, if you don't mind, for the people out there that don't know Marion Calmar, why a Calmar cornhead? Why should people consider that? And tell us a little bit about what might be coming.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that, and congratulations on your success here in your program. And the cornhead thing, and I was telling David earlier that necessity is the mother of invention, and my ancestors were blacksmiths and farmers, and so I kind of grew up in this environment of tinkering and making things work a little bit better. But I was truly driven because I needed to get the corn stalk to decompose. And one of my first invention was the the 15-inch corn head. And, you know, you've played around with that and the narrow rows. And as you know, just as well as I do, when you go to narrow rows, you can jack the population a little bit, jack the fertilizer a little bit. All of a sudden, we've got buku bushels. But the second side effect is the residue. And so I started thinking about, you know, over all the years of running the combine, and we remember the old combines didn't even have a straw chopper in them. And so when we would cut beans, the spinners on the back would just throw the long stalks out on the ground. And I noticed they never wanted to decompose. And so then once we started chewing up and chopping the bean stalk, well, then it was easier to plant and no-till, and just everything started to work better, and we were headed in the right direction. So I thought, well, if we use that philosophy of chopping the bean stubble into small pieces, I think we need to use that philosophy on the corn stalk. It's the same principle. So I also use the law of exaggeration. It's one of the 7 steps to better thinking. And you think about it here with this long stalk, and if you did nothing to it and you just laid it down on the soil, come next spring, it's pretty much still going to be there. But for me, in a corn soybean rotation, what really scares me about a long stalk that's not chopped up, or, you know, you crinkle it or crimp it, is that it almost takes it 1.5 years to decompose. Well, in 1.5 years, I'm going to be in a corn soybean rotation. I'm going to be back to growing corn. And I really don't want to see this in the field, because those smaller pieces, when you have that delayed decomposition, those smaller pieces are going to give you trouble at planting. They're going to tie up the nitrogen, and just a lot of things are going to go the wrong way. So I'm a big fan of accelerating decomposition. So you take the long stalk versus the concept of just grinding the corn stalk into powder. And if you laid that on the ground, I mean, it'd be gone in a week or 2. And so with our confetti, like I told David, about the only thing that's left here is just this outer rind or the bark. It's kind of like the bark on a tree. The inside portion of this corn stalk, the earthworms, microbes, bacteria, it's all gone by spring, and it's back in the soil where it belongs.
How long do you think it takes versus the competitor, Mr. Marion? You know, when you convert that to confetti, I'm sure you've done some research just to see what kind of residue management is actually occurring. You know,
Correct.
surely you got some trials or some data there. You mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, we do. And the degradation, I guess, is one of the words that we use here. And the University of Illinois has studied it quite intensively. And I'm going to say a 20 to 30% increase in speed, which results in maybe a 30 to 40% less fodder on the ground the next spring. And you asked about some of the trials, and we've run the competitors' stalk rolls on our 12-row head. So we have 6 rows with their stalk rolls and 6 rows with ours. And from the combine cab, we can certainly see the stalks coming in, still standing vertically, and then it goes straight down, and we can run it at a slower pace so we don't get the butt shelling. On the competitor side, we're seeing some of that pushing or some of that bulldozing. And in standing corn, that's an issue if you've got a lot of bushels and a lot of acres. But the second thing is that it'll cause the gathering chain to break the stalks off, and then they start going through the combine, which is not a good thing. So we see it right there at the head during harvest, and then on the ground the next spring. I can just walk across the field, not even knowing where they were at, and you can visibly see it, a difference on the ground. And so like I said, in corn on corn, there is a significant yield penalty to leaving longer residue. And University of Illinois is going to peg it 9.8 bushel. But I can tell you that I just feel better. The crop looks better. Now in corn soybeans, I don't know that I can document a yield advantage to running the chopping stalk rolls, but it certainly does plant easier, and I get a more uniform emergence and a better looking crop. But those are kind of the trials that we've been through here over time, and we continue to improve. And we come out with the super chopper, which makes the confetti even smaller yet for bigger yields.
Well, some of the argument that I hear people say is that when they minimize residue really small, that they have a problem with it blowing in the winter times. What's your answer to that?
Sure, and David and I talked about this a little bit earlier too. The thing that I noticed is that with our heads and even with our system, we encourage the farmers to leave 10 to 12 inches of stubble out there in the field, and that's our snow fence, if you will. Maybe you don't see it like we do here in Western Illinois, but that'll keep the leaves and the husk. And I don't care whose stalk roll you use, whose combine, what color it is. Leaves and husks have a surface to weight ratio that allows them to go airborne, and almost the shuck or the husk becomes like an umbrella. And so on a windy day, that is the material that you see going across the field or going out into somebody's ditches or into the landlord's front yard. But this confetti, once it comes out of the stalk roll, it's so small that, and its weight to surface ratio, it just almost sticks right to the ground. And I don't know that I've ever seen the residue blow around. I mean, you can take a fan and try to blow it and it doesn't go anywhere, but a leaf or a husk, that's something that's going to go airborne right after harvest if it gets windy. And that's part of the thing that we like about this system is we're not cutting that stubble off. And for years, people used chopping corn heads, and you're correct. It will blow halfway across the field if you knock that stubble down, even with a some kind of an accelerator or some kind of a surface tillage tool. And once you knock that stubble down, that's my defense mechanism's gone.
I got you. So you've been farming for quite some time to learn, to help create opportunities for your business, what you could learn there, etc. The number one enemy right now is profitability at the farm gate. There's a lot of farmers, Mr. Marion, that unfortunately have that deer in the headlights look, that 1,000-yard stare. They may or may not have something else going on besides commodity prices that have to pay the bills through yield. And the pressure that's on the markets right now. We're staring a big crop in the face. I've been all over. There are some challenges out there, but all in all, the crop looks pretty good. And we are telling growers left and right, we can't depend on the government and tariffs and political news to change this market. But at a minimum, if the market prices don't change to give us some relief, I have encouraged them to at least protect the bushels they got. Everybody likes to get in this save, pinch a penny, whatever they can to save their way to prosperity. They don't want to spend any money right now because they feel like the prices are terrible. You get $8 corn, man, they throw money at it left and right. But when its margins are tight, it's a lot of things get on the chopping block. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, Mr. Marion. Number one, we are encouraging them to protect the bushels they have, late diseases, stink bugs, while you're making it a pass to protect it, from a plant health perspective, maybe address some nutritional needs. But, what are your thoughts on that kind of management? How hard is it to convince people to do that, to protect the bushels they still have? And then just what's your outlook and what would you advise a farmer that's cash strapped and worried about his viability in the future?
I started a senior in high school and I borrowed $500 from my grandma and $500 from the local bank and bought 10 gilts and started farming, and I've been through those, economic tough times. And farmers, we have that resilience and ability to hang in there through the tough times. And these cycles, they go up and down. We've all seen them. And I went through the 80s, which was really tough, because it was not only were the economic times bad, but they lasted. The longevity of it was a part of the other problem that we had there as well. So I always look, you say, well, I want to save a few dollars here and there, but I look at older machinery, and I grew up with older machinery, and I still have quite a bit of it. And you look at what it costs to trade for something new. And I always try to tell farmers in a conversation, everybody has my cell phone number, and they call, and I said, I'm looking for a business plan of some strategy where I could spend $1 and get 2 or 3 back. And I learned that when I was on the engineering team at Deere, that we need to project a 35% return on investment, and hopefully bring home an 8 to 10 at the end of the day. So I pass that along with our upgrade kits for the corn head, and anybody that's corn on corn. This is kind of a no-brainer, because the cost of chopping the residue is $2 per acre. We get about 1,000 acres per row. And so you spend $2 to chop the residue up, and then we get a 9.8 bushel advantage. So we're spending $2, and we're getting, $35 to $40 back. I mean, that's pretty hard to argue with. I mean, you've got a nice big margin there. So the continuous corn guys, you're right. They need to protect the bushels, but you also want to invest for next year's crop today, so that next year we can walk away from this thing and look back and say, well, we learned from it, and we're stronger because of it.
And, are you seeing with I know in Illinois, land prices are crazy. Input costs just seem don't have an end in sight. It is not. I don't want to act like it's gloom and doom, but there's some people out there that's really worried. And $8 market, the cure for high prices is high prices, and we're the worst enemies in the world. And, if all farmers could agree to not plant rows for a year, we'd get high prices again. But when you wasn't looking, Marion, I'd be planting hard as I could go. But getting farmers to agree is a big deal. It's very difficult. But what would you do just as a farmer? Take the corn hat off for a second. Sure. And just take that off for a second. We got a lot of people that value your opinion. As I don't know if you're technically an agronomist, but you do sleep at a Holiday Inn, I'm sure, from time to time, as the old commercial says. And I mean, you carry some weight in the sector of just things that make sense, and you can relate to farmers. What would be your advice to newcomers and the older generations of how to survive this tough time we're in today? What would you encourage them to do?
My grandfather and my dad was a son at that time, went through the Depression, and it was a lot of farmers, they lost their farm, and I had a great uncle that lost his farm, had to sign it back to the bank, and those kind of events. And I think one of our family sayings is that when everybody else runs, you walk, and when everybody else walks, you run. And so right now, it's tough to look at that and wonder where am I going to go from here. But of all the things that I've looked at in the research, and you asked about the agronomy, I've been doing independent on-farm research for 40 years now. I can tell you from an agronomy point of view that nitrogen has always been a very profitable input. And so I would caution people this fall, when they're looking at input costs, I would caution any concept of backing off on nitrogen. my math calculations has nitrogen at about 4 to 1. So if I buy $1 worth of nitrogen, I'm going to get about $4 worth of corn out of it. It's pretty profitable stuff. On the P and K, that one's a little tougher. I don't get the yield response. I don't get the profitability from P and K. So maybe this is a year where you look at buying lime, because that makes, of course, phosphorus and potassium more available to keep that pH, up there at 6.8, 6.5 to 6.8. I wouldn't go over 7 with it, but that's another thing for this fall that we're looking at. But when it comes to planting next spring, I know we all like high yields. I know we like high populations, but again, I'm back to this business train of thought that I learned when I was on the engineering team at Deere. There's got to be a return on investment. And so if I spend another $10 an acre for seed, I'm going to need $20 worth of corn to even think about it. And when you start doing the math on population, sometimes, unless you're in the environment that you and David are in, shooting for those record yields, you got to be cautious with that one. The narrow rows has been something that has always paid well for us, especially in soybeans. You don't have to spend a lot of money to stay, but you also get the weed control that goes along with the narrow rows. And you get the soil erosion. Narrow rows protect that God-given soil to us. That's our responsibility. And so that's something else. But I'm always looking at a business plan. If I'm going to spend $1, I want to make sure that I'm going to get something back for it.
Yes, sir. Well, we got a service debt. There's no doubt about it. And what I found with the narrow rows back when I used to be twin row 36s, and then even went to a really wide twin row. We used to have a 12-inch, basically twin with a 24-inch middle. And then I went from there to 30s and then 15s, and never tried any 20s, but especially for the people that like to broadcast, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
But one of the biggest things that you touched on was population. If people aren't making 10 bushels a thousand, Marion, most people are in that 6 to 7 bushels a thousand. And that frustrates me because I don't think we have 40% of our seed that's really having a problem worth of seed issues. I think it's 40% of our seed is not coming up at the same time and simultaneously. They say if it all comes up in 24 hours or 36 hours or 48 hours, then don't worry about it. But the key to it is how many GDUs between the first emerger and the last emerger. That's really what matters. And we teach the total acre, ways we feel like that helps people get there, so that first box is checked. It is a lot more forgiving if you can get plants up uniform. The lack of sunlight days, the cloudy days from 1,400 GDUs to 2,400 GDUs, post tassel in the grain field, the fact that there can be dry weather spurts or time frames, all of those aspects of it, it's a lot more forgiving to have 28,000 out there. If you're making 10 bushels a thousand, you're making 260 to 280 bushel corn. Most people are pretty happy with that. There's a lot less risk. The stalk diameter goes up. Sunlight penalties, cloudy day penalties just go down. People need to spend more time, in my opinion, getting that planter. That doesn't mean, I know people know how to plant corn, but I doubt their ability to get them all up at the same time. And they think the newest and greatest technology automatically checks that box, Mr. Marion, and that's just not the case. New don't fix the problem. The operator is still the key. And a guy that gets out and understands what that open furrow looks like, looks at how that seed is placed, and know that all of them have the proper germination depth, and all of them are, you're eliminating all the variables that are within our control to make sure they're coming up is a big deal. And ignorance is bliss. A lot of people they plant 38,000, they get 34 of them up, and they call it good. Well, that means the seed company didn't lie to you about the viability of their seed, but it doesn't help them in the economy of what you were mentioning earlier of seed cost. Now they love
Right.
it when you plant 36 to 38,000 because they sell it basically by the unit, right? So
Yeah.
they enjoy that piece of it, but I do think that 26, 28,000 for most people, if they can get them all up at the same time, that 260, 280 takes a lot of risk out of the equation. But the key to it is they got to get them up at the same time. That's the
You know,
key.
you make a really, really good point. If corn's at $6 a bushel, the maximum economic yield might be achieved at a population of 38,000. But when you get down to $3.50 corn, or even $4 corn, the maximum economic yield might be achieved at a population of 26 or 28,000. The seed's not cheap, so you make a good point. That the population, people always want a variable rate and all that. That's all fine, but I think the economics is a bigger driver of population, and the price of corn is a bigger driver. Now, we talked about corn, and of course we all know the importance of even emergence, even spacing, those kind of things. But let's switch over to soybeans for a while. And I did a lot of research on population in soybeans, and we purposely would have plots that would go from a planting population of 50,000 all the way up to 200,000. And I can tell you that I never found a lot of yield advantage above that 50 to 70,000 category at all, especially if you're drilling or in 15-inch rows, because you're going to get the canopy that you're looking for the weeds. And so some of the weed problems that we're having nowadays, I think you can buy some weed control with population in soybeans, but I just failed to be able to show much economic advantage of anything over 100,000 at planting time in soybeans. And I think you interviewed a young man. I think I saw the podcast or the video one time that you grew some record soybean yields, and so did he. And I don't think it takes a lot of soybean seed to grow some tremendous soybean yields.
No, you don't. And the key to high yields in beans, in my opinion, is obviously, we need them flowering and setting pods in the longest days of the year. And that doesn't mean just starting to flower June 21st. That means we have a distinct advantage in the South. We can plant beans March, April 10th, April 15th. We can go out in February based off the weather. It's not a problem. And we can, in 60 to 65 days from the day we plant it to the day it has terminaled out at the top of the plant, however many fruiting nodes we're going to have. We'll have chest high beans, 22 to 24 fruiting nodes on the main stem. We have pods at the bottom of the plant. We have racines in the middle of the plant, and we have flowers at the top of the plant that are done by June 21st. In the Midwest, you're starting to flower, maybe started to flower for 2 weeks, got 5 fruiting nodes maybe that are starting to flower, and it's just tough. And a lot of people feel like that they got to plant longer season beans to be able to make high yields, and I think that's a fallacy. But the number one thing that I tell growers all the time in Total Acre is, if you think it's important to singulate corn and you really want some free bushels, singulate beans. All these beans are this far apart. I don't know if you can see that, versus this far apart. Count the pods on them. When they double for nothing, and you say, well, Randy, that's exaggerating. whatever it takes, single hole plates, meters that deliver the seed to the bottom of the trench so that you don't get that roll in the trench, the brushes, the belts, whatever it takes to get that singulation, that picket fence stand. That's where the free bushels are. And you're exactly right on population. 80K final stand is all that's needed for 100 bushel beans, period. Now, the key to that is how many do you have to plant to get to 80K final
Yep.
stand?
Yep.
And you don't want them to break their neck. You don't want the seed to be bad and causing part of the problem, but 80K is absolutely sufficient. And when you start going in narrow rows, Marion, you take 80K in 30s and you put 80K in 15-inch rows, you just helped yourself on the spacing issue. And you didn't have to buy that high speed tube or that emerged planter, if you didn't necessarily want to. Now they do a great job of spacing even in the narrow rows, but
Right.
at the end of the day, you just cut the population in the drill in half. And there's some free bushels to be had there. There's no doubt about it. And you're right. Most people overpopulate the beans. Now, the magic question is, this is full season beans. Everybody's trending to planting them early because they want those free bushels, them flowering the longest days of the year. There's a lot of bean acres that go in before corn. It's just the way it is. And beans are tough, Mr. Marion.
Yep.
But with that trend to going in earlier, maybe the planter's not 100% dialed in.
Yeah, you make a good point that early planted beans is really catching on. I can only hope and pray that we never see a killing frost that gets us into trouble. I've been in a growing season where we had a late frost.
Sure.
We just hope that just doesn't happen. So the early planting is a good thing. The other thing I would warn on the higher populations on beans is you start setting yourself up for the white mold and it sets off other problems that you just really kind of wondered. And so I noticed a lot of that went away when I eased up, and my beans don't get as tall. But I will also tell you that in our research plots, when we went to planting soybeans at a lower population, they also potted closer to the ground. And so we had to tip the sickle down, and we had to cut them lower than what we normally had. So that's something else to keep in mind is adjusting the head at harvest time. I've seen some pretty ragged looking jobs at harvest, especially now that the fungicides are being sprayed and those things. The beans, there's a lot of green stem beans, there's a lot of green pods, and you just have to be cautious. And I use a 3-inch sickle. I think it does a better job of cutting than a 2-inch sickle, because the window to retrieve the next plant is wider and bigger. And so if I have to lean the soybean one way or the other, I won't push it forward. And I think a 3-inch sickle cuts cleaner than a 2-inch. So that's one thing. But you mentioned about things that we can do, and I'm on the phone 4 or 5 times a day with people. We started almost a month ago with harvest questions coming in, and those green pods now that we're early planting and we're early harvesting. You've got to be able to hold those beans in the threshing chamber if you want them to thresh. And it's another one of these simple common sense kind of a thing. And that's some of the things we're working on at our company, the new product line that really helps with that. But you can take an old 55-gallon barrel, plastic barrel, and take a jigsaw and cut out a plastic band and put it up underneath the first 6 or the first 12 inches of any color combine, and hold those green pods up in the chamber. And then we just use a ratchet strap in there to hold that plastic cover plate in there. It doesn't cost anything, but oh my gosh, it makes the combine so much easier to set. And these are the little things that that you're talking about. What can I do? I don't spend a lot of money, but I get a nice big return. And so that harvesting thing, getting every soybean to stay in the combine, and not having the green pods in the grain tank, because then they've set off a chain of events when they get into the grain bin, that they all slide to the outer edges and then they rot and carry on. So you bring up a lot of good things. There's a lot of emotion that goes with farming. It's a lot of fun. I've had a great career, plan to have many more years to come. We've seen these bad times before, and just when you think you can't survive it, something comes along and there's some daylight and there's better days ahead.
Yes, sir. Well, I will say this, the trend to plant earlier, people can back off on populations, but you started getting in that late planting, that June.
Correct.
Now you may want to go back up in populations. You start talking April 15th to May 15th plantings versus a June 15th planting. That's where the populations may still help you. But anything before May 15th, in my opinion, 80K final stand is really all you need. Well, Marion, it has been a great pleasure being with you. There's always a wealth of knowledge. We've always appreciated your friendship, and appreciate your insight today. I know there's be some audience that are Marion Commerce fans that's going to enjoy this session. It's always been a good pleasure. We appreciate you sponsoring the podcast as well and believing in us. But more importantly, we look forward to being able to break some bread before long, and maybe we can sit down and I don't know if it's at the Commodity Classic this coming year or wherever we may cross paths, but it has been our good pleasure to have you today, and we thank you for being a part of Total Acre and being a part of breaking barriers with R&D. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me, and God bless you both.
Yes, sir. Keep pushing, and thank you, sir. And we're going to sign off today. We hope everybody's listening. There's a lot of good points that's come out today between David, myself, and Mr. Marion. A lot of wealth of knowledge. For that, we're going to sign out. May God prosper you. Harvest is coming up. Be careful. And hopefully we'll see everybody on the crop tour. We start this coming Sunday. I'm on the eastern leg. I've got Tyne Morgan, and David's on the western leg. I told them, I said, I don't care which leg you put me on, as long as I'm with Tyne. She looks a lot better than some of those other ones, right?
For sure.
I tell Chip Floyd, told Chip Floyd, I said, no offense, Chip, Tyne just looks better. Take care.
Right.
Take care, Marion. See you.
You bet. Take care. Right.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another new episode of Breaking Barriers with R&D. Be sure to like and subscribe. And remember, all episodes are available on Farm Journal TV and anywhere podcasts are found.